Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. The reason that I created this video today is to remind you that it's okay just to use partial pieces of an image or partial pieces of a product, and that sometimes when we look at it and we think that's a little bit overwhelming, I can't see how I can make this work. Now I have this stencil here. This is called Enjoy the Moment from Simple Stories, and this is stunning. Now this is a big stencil. As you can see, this is much bigger than the card front that I have. It is 6 by 8 inches, and I can imagine on a 12 by 12, this would create a gorgeous, gorgeous, big, stunning wreath, and I love that. I really, really do, but I also mainly do card making, and so I want to be able to use this on my 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card fronts. So we are going to make this work and also make it look like this is how it was meant to be. It doesn't have to be an entire wreath on the front of your card. Now, just for something a little bit different, because I always go to my Distress Oxide inks or my Simon Hurley dye inks, I'm going to be using pigment inks for today's, because these are going to do just as good a job. And I think it's always good to show that you can definitely use more than one ink to create your looks, and you will still get a gorgeous, stunning look. So I am using some mint tape to A, mask this down, and B, just tape off some of those extra little images. They have lots of individual leaves, they have butterflies, little branches, individual branches, and I appreciate so much on a stencil. I would rather have more images and sort of have to cover them up so that I have more choice than having just one simple image on a stencil. That gives us so much more scope for what we can do with the stencil. So for this one, I'm going to be using 3 VersaFine clear inks. I'm using Verdant, I'm using Green Oasis, and I'm using Rainforest, I believe. I'm using little finger daubers to do this, but honestly, even a makeup sponge is going to work. I have done 1 layer of the lightest green, and you could definitely leave this here. You could also use some different colors in there for a little more dimension, but I'm going to pick the stencil up, shift it, and then put it in a similar direction, but just offset it a little bit so that I can really make a full wreath. Now, I'm not going to change anything up. I am going to sort of mask off a couple of more bits because I've shifted the stencil around a little bit. And by shifting the stencil around, it does make it look as though I haven't just stenciled the exact same thing over and over again. There's a little bit of change in how the leaves look and things. So I'm using the mid green here, but I am going to come in with the darker green and sort of go up the center of the leaves or the vine, just to give a little bit of dimension and a little bit of variation in the color. So completely optional. And you don't have to be too fussy about it or too specific, just a little bit of variation. Now, at the moment, we are starting to get there. I think we could do with 1 more layer. So I'm actually just going to do that bottom bit down the bottom, then lift it up again and kind of shape it how I want for the top. I want it to be all nice and even and sort of perfectly round, if that makes sense, as it's heading around. And so I'm just filling in even individual leaves just here, just to put one here and there to sort of fill out any empty spaces that there are. Now, again, we are going to use only a partial piece of this image. This is the Momenta, I think it's called Bees and Hexagons or something. But whatever it is, the idea here is that even though this is a gorgeous die set, I absolutely love it, and it is beautiful because it reaches the full length of a card, I actually just want the individual bees for this one. So I have die cut this out, poke out all the little bits and pieces, they come out really easy. This brand Momenta, I must admit, I've got some of their background dies and everything just cuts so cleanly. I'm really impressed with this brand. I don't know much about them at all, but I've been enjoying using the couple of bits that I do have from them. And then I'm just going to take a pair of fussy cutting scissors and cut out 1 of the large bees and 2 of the smaller bees. Now, it doesn't matter what that I'm using bees, but I want you to look at your dies and your stamps. Don't necessarily have to cut your stamps, but you can certainly mask things out of them. I have done lots of videos on my channel about how you can just pick selective pieces of your stamps and your dies, and it really changes the look of them. I think think even with these little bees, I think that you would never pick that this was actually an entire row all joined together of bees. You just wouldn't know. And so that way we can definitely get more use out of the products that we choose to invest in, because we all know that this hobby is not necessarily a cheap one. So that means that we can be efficient and try and get the best use out of the supplies that we do choose to invest in. Now, I took some vellum here and I cut out some backing for the wings. I just traced around it with a pencil and then cut inside the pencil lines. Then I am just going to take, this is the Citrus Blend alcohol marker, but any marker, any kid's marker is going to do fine here. I could have die cut it again with some yellow cardstock, but that just seemed like a waste. And at this point, I thought I was going to do a black body on the bee, but actually, as soon as I did this, I just realized it was too dark. It was too black. It just wasn't what I wanted. And so I like it. It looks fine. But I think it was just a little bit more bright and cheerful if I were to do a yellow body, and then I will go over those little stripes that will go on their back, and I will do those in black. So I'm not sure which way around they're meant to be. I didn't even bother Googling it to try and find out, but I just think this way is a little brighter. Now these little bees are going to sit around the wreath, the partial wreath that I created, and I just thought it was something nice to do different other than flowers or butterflies, which I often do, and there are so many of those on the market available. So I thought bees would be a nice little change and really versatile for the type of occasion that you would like to make this as well. Then I just use a little I think this is the Cool Ice Blend or something for the wings, just to give them a little bit of colour, but they are going to have the vellum behind them anyway. I put a little piece of double-sided tape behind the body there of the bee, and that way I can pop in these little stripes and it has something to stick to. My fingers are big and these bees are little, so I am just going to use some little reverse tweezers to help me create the bee. Now, someone said to me recently, a subscriber pointed out when I said I was looking at double-sided adhesive sheets for die cutting, and someone said, I just use my two-way glue pen or like a zig glue pen, and I thought, I have one of those. So I actually pulled it out, fished it out. I haven't used it in, I'm going to say, a year or two, but it still went and worked perfectly fine. So I must remember that as well. Again, it is a liquid, so we are running the risk of squeezing some glue or it's squeezing out the sides. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. Obviously, for die cutting something more intricate, I'm going to probably go with the adhesive sheets. But next time I must remind myself to try the glue pen or keep using it up, at least to make sure that I'm using the supplies that I do have. Now, time to put this kind of all together. I am going to trim this panel down. I prefer to create the whole panel and then trim down, just because that means I can cut out the pieces that I want. I can include the pieces that I want. I can trim off any pieces where I got ink smudges or anything. That means that I can just trim it up easily. So this is just the way that I prefer to do it. Now, I have the Cools Smooth Cardstock. This is a paper pad from scrapbook.com, and I thought it would be nice to do a little coloured matte. This card is relatively simple, but was really fun to create. Now, you can see any of these blues and greens. I think they all look really nice. So you can sort of have a look, see what's in your stash, see if they've got some scraps to use up. For this one, I wanted to go a little bit different, and I'm actually not going to center this. I just wanted to try something a little bit different. And so I chose to go with the light blue. Now, in general, I would say don't introduce any new colors, but I think that the matting layer for the blue here, I think it helps the bees stand out. I think it helps the greens and the yellow hues. It just pops, I think. So it gives it a little bit of color. But here, as I said, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So I'm taking my long-bladed Tim Holtz scissors and I'm going to cut right up against the edge. And then this is because my panel is going to sit right in the bottom right-hand corner. So I use some liquid glue to adhere the matting layer, but I do want to stamp my sentiment that is going to go inside that wreath. And this is a gorgeous little one from Stampendous. I really love this little message. Just a little message coming your way to wish you a bright and cheery day. I also think that this covers a range of occasions and isn't necessarily a happy birthday one, but I think it could definitely be used for that. So I just like the versatility of this. Now, I tried doing some Twilight ink. This is my newest favorite grey ink, and it stamps beautifully. This is from Catherine Paula, but I think it's just a little bit too light. And because I was using my stamping platform, I was able to come back in and stamp it with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I think that this is beautiful and crisp. But I do love that stamp. I'm not sure if it's available still, but I will link it down below along with a full list of supplies in case you are interested in purchasing or just checking anything out, of course. So as I said, I am going to center this sort of in the bottom right hand corner, just for something a little bit different. As I said, it doesn't really matter. If I could have done it in the center, that would have been perfectly fine too. Then I'm going to attach my little bees, and then I'm going to do a couple of extra little things too, just because. If you were inspired by this card, or you'd like to share your creation or show it to me, then the best way that you can do that, and you can post pictures, is on my Facebook group, and that is called Come Crafting with Natasha, and there you can post your photos and things so that I can see them. I also have a link down below to the Buy Me a Coffee website in case you would like to support my channel. I appreciate that so much. Now here is where I'm going to bring in some enamel dots. I just have a few different shades of green here, and I think this just gives a little bit of shine. I think this gives a little bit of dimension. The card is relatively flat without these, and this doesn't add too much dimension. It's going to go in an envelope just fine, but it also fills out the wreath a little bit more and just adds a little bit more interest. You could also use some Nuvo drops or Colourpop dots or something like that, anything just to add in there, but I think that this just adds that little bit more too, and I do add plenty of them. The last thing I couldn't help doing is adding some glossy accents to these gorgeous little bees. I'm just going to add it to the body, again, just to give it some shine. Now, I actually was meant to film this later on when it was all dry, but you'll just have to imagine it. It goes on cloudy, but then it dries completely clear and a little bit dimensional. So that is my card all done for today. Make sure you look at your supplies, see how you could use them, and maybe just use pieces of them or cut them up into different than what they came to you originally. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Thanks, bye.